Hey, Larken Rose here. So a bunch of people have been saying, well, a small bunch, why aren't you talking about Palestine? As if it's some conspiracy or something. And they say that in spite of the fact that I have brought up that exact situation. But the main thing to understand here is that what's happening in the Middle East now, and what has been happening in the Middle East for centuries, and all over the world for centuries, is a symptom of statism and pack mentality. And to point to one example and go, this is totally horrible, what does that add? Nothing. Like, yeah, there's horrible things going on there. And I don't pretend to know all the details. Of course, you have conflicting reports. And here's the thing. People complaining about both sides of it are still the stinking problem. Because the underlying principle is what they don't understand. The state of Israel, it's a state, it's a ruling class, it's a government. It's inherently immoral, it's inherently illegitimate because it's a ruling class. Same with the state of anywhere else and the ruling class of the United States. But if you focus on particular, like, injustice or atrocity going on, which I'm not saying you shouldn't, but if you focus on that and get emotional about the symptom and you don't understand where it came from or why it's happening, it's going to happen again. That's why I always focus on the underlying cause, which is the belief in statism. And I will mention individual examples, including what's going on in Gaza Strip and all that, and historical examples and examples all over the place, but the principle is what matters. And if there could ever be the perfect example of that right now, it's Israel and Gaza and Palestinians. Because you have lots of people on both sides who think in terms of groups. Our group has been wronged by your group. So your group is bad and our group is good. And therefore, it's okay for us to use widespread violence against your group, not just the individuals who actually used violence in the other direction, but just anybody in your group, because our group is good. So when people wave the Palestinian flag or when they wave the Israeli flag, it's a fair guess that they're still doing the pack mentality stupidity, even if their anger is completely righteous and justified because they're responding to something horrible and unjust and innocent people suffering, little children being blown up and slaughtered and just horrible stuff in all directions. Now, if you say, well, in this direction, there's more of it than in that direction, okay, that can totally be true in different cases, and it has exactly no bearing on the underlying principle or the underlying cause of all of it, which is the belief in authority. And Hamas is totally a bunch of violent psychos who believe we have the right to rule and boss people around, and the government of Israel is totally a bunch of power-happy psychos who believe we have the right to boss people around. So is every government everywhere always, and sadly, most of the people living in those areas do not believe in freedom. They do not believe in peaceful coexistence. They're still just bitching over which set of parasitic psychos to put on a throne to give them power over everybody else. That's almost everybody in the world. That's why what I focus on is the principle, because you can't fix Gaza or Israel or the US or the Ukraine or anything anywhere involving authoritarian violence until the insanity of statism and the belief in authority is yanked out by the roots in the minds of all the people. And it's not in the Middle East. They're going to keep doing it because they're going to keep being statists. And innocent people will keep suffering and dying horribly because the people believe in authority. That is why it's happening. You can point to some specific example and situation and say, well, historically, this group did that, and this group is claiming to do that, but really these people aren't this, and these people who are claiming to be those people aren't really those people. They're different people who are claiming to be, but really the original Israelites are the blah, 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 blah. I don't give a shit. If you understand the concept of self-ownership and non-aggression, and self-ownership is an individual thing, there is no collective demographic group that owns anything. If you understand the concepts of self-ownership and non-aggression, and why the belief in authority is so horribly destructive, the histories don't matter. That can sort them out. Like people thinking like moral human beings sorts that out and fixes it. So when people wonder why I don't harp about a particular example of injustice, and it could be today, it could be a historical example, you don't talk about that enough. I constantly talk about that because that is constantly a symptom of what I talk about. And if you think me complaining about that particular injustice is going to make any difference, no, it isn't. Until people give up the belief in authority and grasp and abide by the concept that every individual owns himself and that aggression is wrong, none of the specifics of this group over here and that group over here, the historical this, that, none of that's going to matter. None of that's going to fix. You can choose sides all you want between groups of people who all believe in having ruling classes. In World War II, after Stalin was allies with Hitler for a while, and then that went south, and then suddenly they were arch enemies, and then suddenly Uncle Joe, Stalin, is buddies with the U.S., great, it's the second worst mass murderer in the history of the world, is now our ally, and we're supposed to like him because our authority likes that authority, and our group says that group is now on our side against that other group. And so you had horrible war and destruction and oppression and nasty crap going on in the Battle of Stalingrad, for example. Just huge numbers of unthinking imbeciles killing each other because somebody else told them to. And they all could point to some righteous thing to be angry about. You invaded this, you're doing this, you're a bad guy, your rulers are doing this bad stuff, your rulers are doing this bad stuff. Let's sit around killing each other because we're too fucking stupid to think for ourselves and actually advocate self-ownership and non-aggression. And when you do that, you can use defensive force against actual aggressors, but you're not going to be thinking in terms of, we have to defeat the Germans, or we have to defeat Israel, or we have to defeat the Palestinians are all this. No, the Palestinians are all that. No, Palestinians are people. Most of them are statists who believe in authoritarianism because most people on the planet do. Which means they're still part of the fucking problem. As is also the case with just about everybody in Israel and just about everybody on the rest of the planet. That's why I focus on the principles. Because looking at a symptom and going, this symptom is so horrible and terrible and gruesome and it must end. It's not going to, ever. It'll move around, it'll change names, it'll change faces, it'll change labels, but it's not ever going to end as long as human beings believe in authority. That's the reality. That's why what I talk about is the underlying principle. Because none of the symptoms matter. It's like somebody who wanders into a bonfire every other day and then goes to the doctor, look how badly burned my hand is. The doctor's like, oh, we gotta heal your hand. Your hand is so badly burned. You gotta stop walking into the fucking bonfire. And what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening in Ukraine And then domestically, what's happening with the war on drugs and every tax collection agency and every authoritarian attempt to stomp on dissent and disagreeing voices. And we have that in Australia, we have it in Canada. The level of evil and the level of open violence varies a lot. The nature of the problem doesn't. It's still coming from the belief in authority. And the fact that one group will have a bunch of people who are themselves didn't use any violence and they're being victimized, like a bunch of children dying on all sides, that's just horrible. Like, in no way can you blame the children. However, when a group has a bunch of their children dying and that group advocates authoritarianism and we should be in control, we should have the power, they're the stinking problem. If you believe in authoritarian and collectivism and your children die, you're part of the reason why. And you're part of the reason why children of other people are dying. Because you don't know how to grow the fuck up and become a civilized human being. Now, that doesn't put you in the minority. That's most of the world doesn't know how to be civilized human beings. Because most of the world are statists. Now, there's a lot of statists who, like in the U.S., live very sheltered from that. We don't have war in our backyard right now. But they will proudly give billions of dollars to Ukraine to have some war going over there that they know nothing about, and they'll feel compassionate about it because, well, we were told that they're the good guys and they're the bad guys, so we're supporting the good guys. No, you're supporting war. And sadly, even the vast majority of the victims of war support the thing that makes war happen, which is the belief in government and authority. And it's so frustrating that even an amount of just horrible and suffering and injustice of, entire beautiful cities blown to rubble and tons of people killed, little children maimed and slaughtered, even that doesn't make most people question their own shitty belief systems. And most people in the Middle East have shitty belief systems. And most people on the whole planet have shitty belief systems because they still believe that the argument to have is who should be the authority, who should have the power, who should have the control, who should be able to force their opinions on other people. As long as you're asking that question, you are absolutely part of the problem. And when it comes back to bite you in the ass and blow up your town, your village, that's just a symptom. That's just an effect of the problem that you helped to create. And that's what's so infuriating about every example I could think of for the last however many thousand years. Most of the people who appear as innocent victims, if given the chance, would use the power in a different direction and would be victimizers. That's just the reality of it. Because they still believe in authority and they still believe in government. So, yeah, that's why I talk about the underlying principle. Because whatever today's symptom of it, the symptom this week, this year, this decade, whatever, that's not going away until the belief system of humanity changes. It will keep going. And it doesn't matter how upset you are, and it doesn't matter how upset I am, and it doesn't matter how horrible it is, like looking at images of innocent people being blown to shreds. That won't change it. In case you haven't noticed, lots of people have suffered horribly at the hands of authoritarian violence for pretty much all of human history, and it hasn't stopped. Because most of those people can't even rethink their own beliefs after witnessing their own friends and family blown to smithereens. They still can't pause and back up and go, why is this happening? And might my own belief system be part of why this is still happening? It is. For the vast majority of people on this planet, it is. For every single human being who is not a voluntarist or an anarchist, you're part of the problem. You're still advocating violent aggression against your fellow man. Now, whether it's in the form of, oh, it's just a little tax to pay for some whatever, or in the form of, let's go drop bombs and blow up a bunch of little children over there because they're the children of that group that we decided is evil. You're still part of the problem until your belief changes and you stop advocating authoritarian violence. That's true of Israelis, it's true of Palestinians, it's true of Americans, it's true of everybody. So what good, for those of you who are saying, why aren't you talking about Palestine more often? And the Gaza Strip and what Israel's doing. By the way, Israel isn't doing anything. Individuals working for the ruling class of Israel, like a bunch of them, are doing evil crap. That's not Israel doing something. Israel's a place. And I've talked about the whole stupid collectivism thing of blaming the Jews for this or that or the other people's. Really, all of them? Well, not all of them. Then don't say the Jews. It's just, I keep pointing out, that's just as stupid as saying men are the problem. Really, all of us? Well, not all of you. Well, then don't say men are the problem. That's idiotic, and it's pack mentality thinking, and it just makes things worse. And in the case of men, like I've explained a million times before, the vast majority of violent crime is committed by men. Don't blame me for that. I'm not one of the ones who did it. Blame the people who actually do that, instead of a giant category that includes those people. Same thing if you're going to bash the state of Israel, be my guest. They do evil shit in a very similar way to the ruling class of the U.S. They're militaristic, imperialist bullshit where they're using violence to control as much as they can. That's what they do. That's what ruling classes do. It's profoundly frickin' evil. So when people bash Zionists, Zionism is a political ideology. It's a notion of this is what a government should do and the power it should have. Yes, bash that by all means because it's authoritarian, in the same way I bash the U.S. government or the government of literally anywhere else. Any other ruling class that has the thinks it has the right to rob and control people by force. But it's so frustrating to watch humanity keep focusing on the symptom with this narrow little short-term view of what's going on and going, here's this blown up building and dead children. What are we going to do? Well, what you need to do is think, but that's probably not what you're going to do. You're going to get emotional, you're going to get angry, and then you're going to cheer for some other authoritarian power that's going to do something in some other direction and kill some other children somewhere else, and they're going to do the same thing. Meanwhile, the evil bastards who fund the war machine and sell weaponry and run the banking system and do all that, they're back there cashing in on it, and they don't give a crap about any of you. And that's what's just so infuriating is there are very few all the way innocent people in the world, other than children who, don't even have a chance to know what the hell's going on yet. Because almost everyone in the world is cheering for one form of authoritarianism or another. And they don't even recognize you are the problem. And it's so sad to watch, and I even see a bunch of pro-freedom people fall into the trap of, we have to pick sides between this group and that group. No, we don't. The only groups that matter, the only us versus them that matters, are people who are willing to peacefully coexist with others and people who aren't. And every single person who believes in government is not willing to peacefully coexist with other people. Now, they don't recognize that. They think governmental power and authority is real, and it's legitimate, and it's necessary because they fell for that bullshit. And as a result, they unwittingly cheer for constant evil violence. And whether it's in the form of just regulation or taxation or all the way warmongering and blowing people up, the underlying principle is the same. That's why I focus on the principle and why I don't harp on any particular symptom of it. Because all the symptoms are going to keep happening as long as most people are statists. And when people aren't statists, there won't be any more of those symptoms to complain about. There won't be large-scale war. There can be individual crooks and people victimizing each other on a much smaller level that decent people will still have to deal with. But these large-scale injustices are a direct result of the belief system of the people. And in almost every war, or even just every political campaign, everyone involved is still part of the problem because they're still advocating statism and authoritarianism. And that's what I aim at. The Thoreau quote, to 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil, there's one striking at its root. This is the root. What's happening in Gaza, that's one of the many, 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 many branches of horror and injustice and atrocity. Yeah, it's really bad. Focusing on how bad it is instead of trying to understand why that happens at all doesn't get anywhere. Humanity's been doing that for centuries. And that's why I talk about the principle. It's why I made Candles in the Dark, to have other people get better at communicating with other people. It's why I'm working my butt off now. Again, I have way more time to work on it now, on the mirror, which will help people to re-examine these things. Instead of still being part of the problem while getting emotional and upset and righteously infuriated at the symptoms of a problem that they help to create. And it's so frustrating to watch because most of those people, they're not evil. They're not trying to make it happen. They're devastated. They're horrified by the effects of their own belief system. But most people don't have the self-awareness or the intellectual honesty to back up for 2 seconds and think, am I doing anything that contributes to this? Yes, you are. If you're not an anarchist or a voluntarist, absolutely you are contributing to the problem. Not on purpose, not out of malice, but because you were indoctrinated and you were ignorant and you were gullible, like pretty much everybody I know, myself included. I was a statist for many, many years. And until you can reconsider your belief system, you can righteously condemn all you want, the symptoms of it. It's not going to fucking change until you, and a lot of people like you, dare to re-examine your own belief system to actually change what humanity believes. Because that's the only thing that's going to end this crap.